The Week 14 main slate in daily fantasy football is going to force us out of our comfort zones because we're either going to be using lower salaried running backs or tight ends, guys who have somewhat flimsy roles, or diving into games that have lower totals. I'm okay with some of those. I think there are some games with lower totals that are pretty in play for stacking and potentially underrated in that regard. But either way, you're not going to build lineups that make you smile at the end for week number 14. That's okay. That's very okay because everyone else is in the exact same boat. So we're going to break down how to navigate that, where to find plays we like, where to find some value, hopefully get you set for week 14 and the DFS main slate. This is the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sanas. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gdula. He is the senior managing editor of numberFire.com. Brandon, are you ready to be uncomfy in week 14?
I guess I don't have a choice, but it's good to know that I'm not the only one who gauges my, interest in a lineup with whether I, smile when I click submit.
You seem like a big smiler.
Yeah. I mean, I smile and laugh on this show way more than is normal because you're a riot.
Sure. Yeah, that's exactly what I would have picked.
But yeah, I guess I never thought about, literally smiling once I click submit. But
do you have that feeling ever? Because I have it sometimes where it's a special lineup and the joke is oh yeah, and then those always go wrong. And those actually typically tend to be okay. I don't think I'll get there this week, but do you actually ever get ooh, that's fun?
Yeah, and usually when that happens, you beat me by 30 in our head-to-head, and I just have a terrible week. So I think maybe it's just perception differences, but
that hasn't happened often this year. You're still up 8-6, I think, at this point, or I don't know. You're up by enough where I'm in a hole. Oh, it's 8. Must be 9-6. Because we've had 8-5. 8-5 is the score. So that doesn't happen very often so far this year. I think I was 3-0, and then I lost 17 straight. So we're trying to claw our way back here.
I think you started off 2-0, and then it was 3-1 through 4 weeks. But It's been mostly Brandon's in the spreadsheet column since then.
I did beat you last week, despite not using DJ Chark, who was $4,000 under salaried. So I guess that was the only good lineup I built last week. So I guess that's a good thing.
Did you smile after you submitted it?
No, I hated that lineup. I hated that lineup so much. It was awful.
That bodes well for you this week.
I didn't like my head-to-head lineup at all, but I liked some of my tournament lineups. Not a ton, but they just didn't work out. Hopefully this week is better, though. We're going to break down guys we're prioritizing, which games we're actually okay stacking, whether it be the games that are the traditional game stacks or potentially some other ones as well, and get you set for week 14 in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. We, of course, are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon, I think, has the podcast app. Anyway, we're there. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can find us. And while you're there, if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review because it does help us out a bunch. Twice weekly NFL shows. Still got UFC for big events as well via Austin Swaim, and also NBA DFS via Tom Vecchio every weekday. Get all those here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. With only a handful of Monday Night Football games remaining this season, FanDuel and Visa are coming together to make sure the excitement surrounding Monday nights is at an all-time high. Introducing Monday Night Perfect Picks presented by Visa, a free-to-play fantasy contest on FanDuel that gives you a chance to win your share of $10,000 in cash prizes, courtesy of Visa. Here's how it works. You'll be presented with 10 questions centered around on-field action for Monday night's NFL game. Fans who answer the most questions correctly win their share of the $10,000 prize pool. It's that easy. The contest is now live, so head to FanDuel.com/free/contest/Visa Perfect Picks and make your picks before Monday night. That's FanDuel.com/free/contest/Visa Perfect Picks. No purchase necessary. Age and location restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See terms at FanDuel.com. Visa and its financial institutions have not sponsored or offered this promotion in any way. Let's dig into this slate here, Brandon, for the Week 14 NFL DFS main slate. And like I said, I think that my slate overview is you got to be uncomfy, and that's okay because everyone else is uncomfy too. That does not mean, I'm down on this slate. It just means that I'm going to do some stuff that is uncomfortable, but I think that if you're tuned in, that's a good thing for you. So for me personally, I do think it's a good slate for us because we're tuned in, but it is going to force us to do some things that make you cringe a bit. That's my slate overview. What stands out to you?
Yeah, I think I'd follow that up with a question of like knowing like what is it that's making you uncomfortable is a good feeling. If you feel uncomfortable and you're like, I don't know why, that can be tough. So like, is it the game stack, like the lack of game stacks? Is it the state of running back? Is it everything for you?
For me, it is knowing I will need to spend down on a running back with several paths to failure in order to make my lineups work and get in the players I want to prioritize. I don't like to use running backs with roles that I think have a ceiling on them, and I think that I'll have to this week. So that's kind of where it's at for me.
And is that your second running back, or specifically you're kind of trending away back into the old where you're looking for the whether it's you're playing your latest starting guy in the flex, but are you talking like your third running back, your flex is going to be iffy, or do you think it's going to be even your second guy's a bit iffy?
It depends on, do I have Justin Jefferson in my lineup? Because if I have Justin Jefferson, it'll be my second running back, and I'll probably have a receiver in the flex. But if it's not a Jefferson lineup, then it could be the third guy, because I can definitely be okay with a lot of the guys in the 7,000 range, like Tony Pollard. We talked about him Monday. I'm still on board with that one for sure. $7,500. Travis Etienne, not a great matchup against the Titans, but I do think that game is enticing a bit at 74. Isaiah Pacheco at 73. DeAndre Swift popped up on the injury report again Wednesday, which was annoying. I thought we were done with this, but that happened. Still okay with him. So I'm okay with a lot of guys in the 7,000 range. But I will need to have one, I think, guy in the 6,000 range to make things work.
So I think the overview for me, and this is applicable whether you play, if you play anything other than one lineup, if you play more than one lineup, it could be 3, 5, 10, 150, is making sure that because there's a lot of uncertainty, what feels right and what feels good is saying, well, okay, well, like DeAndre Swift's in a good game, but he's not 100%. I'll get some of him. I'll get some Tony Pollard. I'll get, and you just go down the list. You're cycling in everyone. You have no real exposure, like advantage over the public, the context you're playing in. And therefore you are kind of playing the consensus player pool. And so it's almost impossible to see a way that is beneficial for you, because in the lineups that you have, like let's say DeAndre Swift does have a good game, but you had 15% of him, and then you're mixing in, all these other game stacks, and you have like no concentration. That's what I'm feeling I might fall into, and I need to find ways to take stands, plant some flags, and that way, in the event that I'm on the right core, it's actually beneficial.
Yeah, I think that just kind of going through the prioritization process, which for me involves like hand ranking guys, deciding like, okay, in this 7,000 range, I want to commit to Pollard. I think that's probably the way it'll wind up, is I just want to commit to Pollard. I think that's where it'll wind up. But going through that process and deciding, which of these guys do I feel best about? Which of these guys has the most probabilistic and highest path to a ceiling, stuff like that. Go through that process and decide, whether it be because of workload, efficiency, game environment, whatever it may be, actually sort things out so you're not getting too spread out in that regard. But it is a bit uncomfortable for sure. Mm-hmm. And again, that's a good thing, I think, but we'll see.
Yeah. Like I can see right now, I currently have Pollard and I think ETN is like my top two running backs, but I'm going to feel by Sunday, like, I should get some like Pacheco. What if DeAndre Swift's role is actually like scaling up and the practice thing doesn't really matter? Like, then I'm just playing too many guys. I'm not saying 4 running backs in similar salary tiers, too many guys, but you do that at the top end because we have some studs. I just got to figure out ways to whittle things down by Sunday.
I think if I have optimal situations on Sunday, I would love to have one running back in the 8,000 range, one in the 7,000 range, one in the 6,000 range per lineup. I think that's where I want to be.
Yeah.
Because the 8,000 range, I think, is a lot better than the 7,000 range. I like the 7,000 range, but I think that like McCaffrey Saquon, Mixon depending on where our confidence there, Dalv, maybe Nick Chubb even in game stacks. Like I think that range is pretty good. I'd like to have one of those guys if I can get there. It is uncomfortable though, for sure.
Yeah, and I did a study on pivots entering the season, and like the sort of 7,000 range roughly for running backs is not a great tier to be in.
Yeah.
Especially if there's chalk, because there's the guys you're talking yourselves into for the role being better, like Pacheco, overcoming the matchup, overcoming his workload limitations. ETN potentially the matchup, maybe quarterback not 100%, and so you're doing that, and then maybe you're missing out on those studs. So it's a lot of questions throughout the position, all positions this week.
I think it's the toughest running back slate we've had in a bit.
It feels like it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's dig into the injuries here for week number 14. Talk about ETN's team because Trevor Lawrence missed practice Wednesday with a toe injury he suffered in week 13. He played through that in the second half, and it sounds like Doug Peterson expects to play. Lawrence expects to play. So we'll talk about the Jags against the Titans in the trends section. Brock Purdy will start for the 49ers in place of Jimmy Garoppolo. Purdy played decently against the Dolphins last week, but now facing off with the Bucs, much tougher task there. How are you viewing Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel with Purdy starting for this week?
I don't mind it. Those guys got peppered from Purdy with the targets. Deebo, 10 of the targets from Purdy, which was about 28%. McCaffrey, 9, 25%. Ayuk had 7, which was 19%. And I've seen some positive comments about like Purdy as a leader and the fact that he like took ownership. He missed the throw to Brandon Ayuk, and he's like, I'm going to get you the ball. So like the one name that not involved in that is George Kittle, who had just 2 of the targets, low ADOT from Purdy, caught both of them. But, the question is, do you think all 4 guys are involved? If so, might be a bit sticky. If you think that Kittle maybe just blocks a bit more to help things out with Purdy, like McCaffrey, Deebo, both very much in play. So I'm not that concerned. And as much as I think Jimmy's probably like underrated, I don't think this is.
He's simultaneously over and underrated.
Yes.
That's my thought.
But I don't think this is like a huge downgrade.
I think it's a downgrade enough. I don't want to go at Ayuk. Ayuk's salary 67. I probably don't want to go at Deebo at 71 just because like he's still dealing with an injury. He hasn't had a lot of explosion so far this year, even though he got 10 targets in that game, just 58 yards on those. That's a concern for me. McCaffrey, I will be on this week, despite the fact that he's facing a Bucs rush defense that has kind of surged back to being what they were previously. They've gotten healthier up front. That's helped them really come on strong there. So it's a tough matchup, but with the way he was used in the passing game, 10 targets, 17 carries, 4 targets inside the red zone this past week. I think that we talked last week about like, with this knee thing, can he still torpedo us? I think I got lucky he didn't torpedo me last week because I think that the way he was used was well within his range of outcomes. So McCaffrey, I'll be there. And of the guys in the 8,000 range, as of now, he's my favorite. I want to do more digging into Saquon Barkley because he could unseat him. Questions around Joe Mixon with P. Ryan playing well and stuff like that. But I think McCaffrey, as of now, is my one in that tier.
I think it's Mixon for me.
Okay, that's fair. We'll talk about them in the bookmaker section. Lamar Jackson likely out this week with a PCL injury. Tyler Huntley will start in place against the Steelers. Huntley at $7,000. Is that low enough where you consider him given his rushing upside? And how are you viewing Mark Andrews, who went nuts with Huntley at the helm last year?
Yeah, so Huntley's like fantasy. They kind of runs like the similar goal line stuff that they do with Lamar Jackson. Obviously that the game winner last week, but the fantasy production for him overall was not as good as it might have seemed, especially like in starts. And if memory serves, he came in relief 2 different times and like was pretty good. And I'm not saying that he's a very different quarterback than Lamar Jackson because they run a similar system whenever they're both playing, but I think it's different if you're prepping for Lamar and then like someone else comes in. So I don't want to like it's weird because he has that upside, but he also has a really low floor, and we don't care about floor so much, but I kind of do it when it's a quarterback, because if your quarterback gets you 12 points, you have no chance, even at 7,000. So
yeah,
I wouldn't like fault anyone for getting there, but I think that there are much better plays, and I don't know if the salary savings is enough for me for this week.
Yeah, I think that if he were in like a softer matchup, I'd give it consideration. But with TJ Watt being back, like this is not a soft matchup against the Steelers. I think the Steelers defense is awesome this week for DFS, $3,800 to them. Huntley, his efficiency was legitimately pretty bad last year on the whole. Watt did leave briefly during week 13, but he got a limited practice on Wednesday, which means I think he's going to play. So we should be good to go there. So I won't be on Huntley. I think that the Andrews stuff is fun, but like with decreased passing efficiency, Andrews seems like he's been banged up all year. I'm okay. Being lower on 2, it could burn me, but that's fine. Both Kenneth Walker and DJ Dallas missed practice for the Seahawks on Wednesday. Travis Homer got in a limited session after he was inactive for week 13. If both Dallas and Homer are active, it seems likely to be a committee. But would you have any interest if it were Homer active with Tony Jones there and then likely Wayne Gallman being active after he was signed to the practice squad this week?
If there's Dallas and Homer, I'm not getting there.
Yeah, I agree.
If it's Homer, Tony Jones, and Wayne Gallman, I would kind of view it not only as Travis Homer, but that Homer would get enough work where I'd consider him. I don't think that they want to use Tony Jones based on the fact that they brought on DJ Dallas back when he was hurt last week. So I'd have some passing interest in Homer if Dallas is out.
Yeah, Homer's not an early down guy, but like I know he'll get work in the passing game. I know that. And then there's always the potential he gets work as an early down guy too. He's a very good pass catcher. We've seen him get involved there before. So if we get just Homer with Jones and Gallman, I would be intrigued by Homer. I'd still view him below James Cook at 61. But I'd at least be looking deeper into Homer and seeing if I could talk myself in there, because I think that is intriguing enough to buy in, especially in a good spot against Carolina. Joe Mixon practiced in full on Wednesday, meaning he should be cleared from concussion protocol this week. Hayden Hurst seems likely to sit due to his calf injury. We'll talk about them in the Bookmaker section. David Njoku got in a limited practice Wednesday with his knee injury. He missed week 13 due to that. We'll talk about them in the Bookmaker section as well. Deontay Foreman missed practice Wednesday with a foot injury. He said he's 95% sure he'll play, which implies to me that it's closer to like 70 because NFL players tend to overestimate their health by quite a bit.
Yeah.
So
everyone says I'm going to play. I'm 100% to play.
95 left a lot of
95, yeah.
The 5% is telling.
Might as well be 50%.
People don't understand odds, probabilities. So 5% is a lot, and it's interesting. The Panthers are 3.5-point underdogs against Seattle. Actually, 4-point now. But they got good quarterback play from Sam Darnold before their bye week. Any interest in Foreman for you, assuming that he's good to go?
Normally I would say no.
Yeah.
But I could see myself in sort of a bind. Or just, I guess, overall mini stacks. I want correlation despite the fact that I don't love a lot of games on this slate. I feel like I could do worse than Foreman with the assumption the game stays close and like DK Metcalf. I think Metcalf's at a high salary of 79. It's a little bit hard to prioritize, but I could see that being something that I get to in my, 5th through to like 10th lineups. I don't think it's that outrageous where I need 150 to get there because running back is so bad. And then again, I'm playing the narrative that game actually stays close.
Yeah. I really don't mind this game in terms of like some mini stacks. Because Seattle might have to pass a lot given the running back injuries. That's a good thing for pace. Their rush defense is bad, which means that Carolina could be efficient. Sam Darnold, like I said, played well. I don't expect him to keep on playing well, but it's within the range of outcomes for sure. So having like a DK Metcalf, Deontay Foreman stack or a DK Metcalf, DJ Moore stack for the full abbreviation stack, I think that's enticing. Are there
abbreviations if there's no periods?
I think so.
Also,
if you have periods in your name, you should reevaluate. Not you personally, but it's a lot of work to add the periods in. So I just check their Twitter accounts, and if they use periods there, cool. If they don't, I'm not using them. Like DJ Chark has no periods in his name on Twitter. So shout out to our king, DJ Chark. I think that my interest level in DJ Moore this week might be higher than it's been all year.
Combined.
Yeah. I would back off if he projects for like 15% roster rate, then I'm like, that's a little high. But I'm interested for the first time. It's been a while.
Yeah. I don't hate it, but
Yeah.
the salary of 6,900, I don't know how often I can specifically be in that range, just because unless I go completely balanced, which even then you still need value receivers and tight ends, and like I mean he's game stacks only, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like if it's not game stacks, I'm using Devontae Smith every time +2. Like 100% of the time,
Yes.
102% of the time. So yeah. Michael Carter got in a full practice Wednesday, meaning he should be back this week. But Robert Saleh said that Zonovan Knight is not going anywhere, which means I think that it implies he'll have a role. It does not imply he'll keep the same role, but it also means he could. I don't know. It's a wide range of outcomes there. Knight is $6,300, but a big underdog against the Bills. Is Zonovan Knight DFS viable for you this week?
I would say if we weren't going to get Carter, which I know we are, he would be quite viable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he is still, again, because I'm going to take some imperfections somewhere in my lineups. I could see playing Knight in a stack with the Bills to some degree. Like he's going to be game stacks only. So it's kind of weird where I'm not exactly playing the guys I like the most based on process. I'm probably going to be figuring out which games I want to stack the most. And just if it ends up being like Gabe Davis and Zonovan Knight mini stack, I'm okay with that. And again, I gotta watch that I'm not getting mini stacks of like Foreman Metcalf, Zonovan Knight, Gabe, or some other pass cat. Like that's what that's what my fear is, and I'm already like devolving into that potential.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of interest in the Jets, honestly, in this game.
Right.
I did bet them close, but we'll talk about the Bills side in the trend section. And I think there are better ways to be a bit different this week than being super high in the Bills. Like Gabe is a one-off, Stephon Diggs is a one-off, and James Cook is a one-off, but like I don't know if this will be a game that I want to stack. Repeat divisional matchup they just played a couple weeks ago. That game was low scoring. Bills being more run heavy now. I think Mike White's not the best. He's better than what they had, but like not the best still. So I don't think this will be a game stack situation for me. Kadarius Toney practiced Wednesday for the first time since suffering his hamstring injury. We'll talk about the Chiefs in the trend section. Cortland Sutton likely to miss week 14 due to a hamstring issue. Greg Dulcich had 8 targets last week. Jerry Jeudy had 4 on very few snaps. He returned from an ankle injury then. Didn't practice last week until Friday, which I think is why he was super limited during the game. Are either Jeudy or Dulcich in play for you against the Chiefs?
Dulcich for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's a tight end and finally got some yardage last week with 85. He had 2 11-yard games out of the past 3 entering, which, like, I'm not saying he's Travis Kelce, but you got to get Greg Dulcich more than 11 yards. It's just egregious. Where's Jeudy? I haven't looked at Jeudy yet.
He's 65, which is higher than I was hoping it'd be.
Yeah, that's a little tough. But again, if I want to play the Chiefs, if I want to play Mahomes, I got to be open to Jeudy and Dulcich doing something.
Right.
Especially because the Chiefs and Bills have not been airing it out as much. We talked about that on Monday. They've been scaling back their pass rate over expectation. They're still about league average in recent weeks, and I expect them to be, just generally pass heavy and overall, but I'm higher on Dulcich than Jeudy though.
I am too, because of salary, because of position, stuff like that. I will say that you can make a Mahomes, Kelce, Jeudy lineup work. If you do that, if you put Mahomes, Kelce, Jeudy in with DJ Chark as an assumed value play in there, Steelers defense at 38 as kind of the fill in, you're at 6,800 left for 2 running backs, a receiver, and a flex. If I put in James Cook at 61, I'm at 70-33. I can live around the 7,000 range. That's okay. So I can make it work with Jerry Jeudy. I do wish he were lower salaried, but I think it's okay. I prefer Dulcich, like you said, but I think both those guys are options. I just prefer Dulcich, which is exactly what you were saying. But Judy's salary is off-putting, but I'll still be there probably at times because I will have Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, he got 4 targets on 8 routes last week.
Yeah, and he's been, I think, better than perception this year. Looking at his yardage totals, they're actually not bad. So I think he's played better than perception. Russ, when targeting Judy's been fine this year. So I feel like it's okay, despite being turned off by the salary. Treylon Burks missed practice Wednesday after suffering a concussion last week. With Burks out, Okonkwo had 5 targets, ran a healthy number of routes. Where does he sit on your radar at $4,800 against the Jags?
He is way up there.
Yeah.
He's a love for I think both of us.
Yeah.
Yards per route run's a good stat, and I would assume it stabilizes fairly quickly. I know it's very predictive year over year, but it accounts for the volume that you're actually on the field, but also your efficiency and target share. That's why it's a good stat. That's why yards per team attempt when you're scouting college players is probably a very similar stat. But he leads tight ends. He doesn't have a huge sample, but he's very good. He has yards after the catch ability. We saw Pat Freiermuth last week have 1 long catch and be a really good tight end play. I think that's very much in the cards for him. I don't think he'll see more than 7 targets at max just because of this offense, but I'm pretty heavy on Okonkwo this week.
Yeah, I think the only worry I have is that he'll be super popular. Because we're not alone. There's been a lot of the Okonkwo drum has been banging on Twitter throughout this week. So I think people will be there. And so I've been thinking through okay, are there viable pivots? I dug into Daniel Bellinger at $4,800. His ADOT is 2.6, whereas Okonkwo's is 9.1, I believe. Okonkwo has had a lot of yards up to the catch potential. So I do want to pivot at times, Dulcich would be probably the most popular guy in the slate. I want to pivot to Bellinger at times, but that's kind of the only concern for me with Okonkwo is if he maintains the same role he had last week with a 59% route rate, given how productive he is on his routes. And the fact that, again, I think this game is pretty okay. Also, the Jags rush defense is the one thing they do well, which could encourage the Titans to throw more. I feel it's really just the roster rate concern that kind of sticks out there for me. Everything else is pretty sick for him, honestly.
Yeah. And that pivot study I did entering the season, value chalk tight ends are pretty good. We're usually pretty good at identifying opportunity relative to cost. That's not to say that, true eruption games are super common, right? But if your goal at sort of quote unquote punting the position is decent, some sort of pulse, yeah, it's usually a pretty good option.
Okay. And Okonkwo, like you said, will be a guy we discuss later on as well. Let's dig in now to the bookmaker section and start things off with the highest total on the slate by a wide margin. That is the Detroit Lions hosting the Minnesota Vikings. Total is 52.5, with the Lions favored by 2.5. This total was 51.5, got up to 53.5, now back down to 52.5. And we've seen a lot of bets coming in the Lions because I think it was a pick 'em on Sunday night and is now Lions minus 2.5. So super high total. What's your view of this one for stacking?
The instant reaction is to love it, but for me to truly love a game stack, it's got to be a 2 QB game. And I think there's a legitimate question this week for both quarterbacks in this matchup. And I want to hear your thoughts on both Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff.
I think with Hurts in a really good spot, Burrow in a really good spot, Mahomes being a fun pivot, Josh Allen is Josh Allen. I won't use either. So I think the way I tend to view these games, where it's a no quarterback game for me, is I will build the way my lineup building process works is I have a skeleton in there for the game stack. It's Mahomes, Juju, Judy. And then I fill that in and then put those 3 guys in and then go from there. A lot of times when there's a game like this where I don't want either quarterback. What I will do is put in the first stack and then build in a mini stack of the other game that I like right after that. I think this game is good enough where I will probably do that. Not in every lineup, but like do that pretty often and consciously make sure I'm getting mini stacks of this game. And it's like, okay, I got a couple spots left. Even if I don't like build in the stack right away, I got a couple spots left, one receiver, one running back. Let's try to get a game stack in from that Vikings Lions game. I think that's probably the way I'll wind up handling it.
Yeah, so they played already this season back in week 3.
Mm-hmm.
Cousins had 18.3 FanDuel points. Goff was at like 14.8 or 14.9. I'm not saying that you just copy paste that, but these two teams have met already, which is generally bad for efficiency that the following game, especially for like quarterback ceilings. It just typically is a bit more muted because teams have.
Especially true for quarterbacks who are dependent on efficiency, and because neither of these guys run, that is true for them.
So I think that they're very good, like season-long plays. If you need a streamer, there's a lot of buys, whatever. Like, I can see that case, and I can also see that how that would bump up their popularity numbers. I think that they'll rate out as good, like per dollar plays
Probably.
this week.
Yeah,
but again, anytime it's a zero quarterback game for me, I can't say that I absolutely love it. That being said, elsewhere in this game, I'm very intrigued, and I do think that Justin Jefferson is someone I'm going to go out of my way of to have exposure to. I very rarely get to the superstar, like 9,000 plus receivers, but I think I need to try it because he's the guy. He's a guy always, but I think this week he's the guy who could put up 35 and really, give us no Jefferson, no cash.
Yeah. I think that he's pretty
no Jefferson, no smiles this week. Let's get that.
Exactly. And that's part of why I was like, we were talking at the beginning, like, okay, the lower salary back might be my running back too, if I'm getting Jefferson in. Because I was consciously building Jefferson lineups earlier on this week. I don't tend to build early in the week very often, unless I need to get a feel of like what the roster construction of the slate looks like. And I thought I had to, in order to see what getting Jefferson in there looked like. And granted, that was a lineup where I was shoving in T. Higgins and Devontae Smith because I adore both those guys relative to salary. So that was a factor in wanting to get those guys in while still getting Jefferson, and I could make it work. But I think a lot of times I wind up not having enough of the high salaried receivers. I want to make sure I don't do that with Jefferson this week for the reasons you mentioned. Now, people are going to cite Jeff Okudah and his numbers against Jefferson back in week number 3. Okudah, I believe, got banged up in week number 13. He played every snap, but he missed practice on Wednesday. Let me double check that. He has an illness, so he'll probably play. But I think people will probably cite Okudah's numbers against Jefferson in week 3. I think that might allow us to get like Jefferson at 15% as opposed to 20%, and that matters. I don't worry about Okudah that much because I think that Kevin O'Connell is a smart guy and can find ways to scheme Jefferson open. And
2 carries last week.
There we go. I think that Jefferson is like more of a priority for me than most high salaried receivers typically are, is the way I'd phrase it.
Yeah. I'm messing around with some lineups with, 2 mid-range running backs like Joe Burrow with a Tyler Boyd, because I got to be realistic here. And Jefferson, and I think it's doable.
Yeah.
I don't know. My question to you is Jefferson someone you're prioritizing in your main or like head-to-head lineup?
Head-to-head, potentially not, because that would force me to get pretty thin in some spots where I don't want to get thin. I would like to, obviously, but I don't want to be super thin and using guys with bad medians, but also bad upside in cash. So I don't know if I'll get there. I'd like to, but I'm not sure. DJ or Amon-Ra St. Brown, more realistic to get to in that type of format and still very desirable there. But like a main tournament lineup, I guess it depends where I settle in on James Cook. Because if I decide James Cook is worthy of that roster, then I got to spend that savings on a guy who has juice.
Yeah.
And name me a guy who has more juice than Justin Jefferson.
I mean, he's got the 2 J's in his name. How can he have more juice than that?
Justin Jefferson?
But yeah, so I think he's great, but I don't want to overlook Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Right.
Minnesota last in catch rate over expectation allowed two opposing receivers. I think it's just like sort of by nature of how their defense kind of works a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, and he's someone who can do damage on like 12 underneath targets. So
Yeah.
I'm, I don't think I could really stack those two together this week.
Yeah.
It'd be fun.
So
But if you go like Jared Goff
eh,
to stack both of them and Goff goes for like 303, I think that, is something worth considering.
okay. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson. I don't want to put Chark in there because I don't really want to have two receivers on the same team. That kind of caps your upside a little bit there. So I'll put Isaiah McKenzie at 56 in tentatively as like the value receiver. Chikakonkwo at tight end and a defense. 69.75 left with no quarterback yet. So we'll put James Cook in here. Let's put Burrow in there. With Burrow and James Cook, I'm at 67.50 left. So if I can put Pollard in there and then I'd have 6,000 left for my flex. It means I have two thin wide receivers and James Cook. I can make that work, but also means I have no Burrow stack. I just realized I could use Boyd, but I'm not as high on him as you are.
I'm high out of necessity, which
Yeah.
not a good feeling, and I talk about that a lot. I don't like to play guys based just on their salary, but
For sure. You can make it work, but it's pretty gross. And it would look easy. It'd be easier if you had Goff or Cousins in there. Maybe it means we should be high in the quarterbacks, honestly, if we like this game this much. But
so like if you go Goff, Jefferson, Amon-Ra with Chig and the Steelers, you have a flex receiver and two running backs. You're at 6,600 even. I think that you could do a lot worse than that.
yeah,
So I think that for what those two receivers could do relative to the slate, I think maybe I got to bump up Goff and make that like a half quarterback game.
okay.
I don't know if I'm going to play Kirk Cousins though.
I would not use Kirk either. Running backs. We have DeAndre Swift and Dalvin Cook. What's your view of those two guys relative to the slate?
Cook, I think, just a little over salaried for.
You got juiced up for the matchup, and they went a little bit too far with it.
I mean, I think he's got like true eruption potential.
Yeah,
but it's not as legitimate as other backs historically in the upper 8,000 range. So I'm not quite feeling like I have to get there. And then, I think DeAndre Swift is fine for game stacks because then you're playing the angle that he just does play more than expectation. But if he got in a full practice on Wednesday, I would probably have said that Swift was someone I was considering for a main lineup because I think that the salary would have been too low. But I think it's probably about fair if he's going to be iffy and we don't really know what to expect.
If he gets in a full practice Thursday, I'll bump him. Because I think Dan Campbell does care about practice, which I don't think is stupid. I think it makes sense to actually care about practice, honestly. I'd bump him there. With Dalv, you're still going to get there for game stacks, though, correct?
Yeah, I'm gonna it's something I want to prioritize.
Yeah,
it's just really hard to build around an
$8,700
salaried running back this week,
especially if we have concerns around what the true ceiling is there. Yeah. Let's move now to the Browns at the Bengals. Second highest total on the slate. That one is at 47.5 with the Bengals favored by 6.5. That spread is lengthened. It was 4.5 on Monday. Now 6.5. I think I can say we know we want Bengals. I don't think that's a overreach on my part, but what's your interest level in the Browns after their struggles in Deshaun Watson's first game back?
I don't know how long it's going to take for Watson to get back, but he's got a second straight road game. This time against the division rival. I know that he hasn't had a long history within the division, but I think that the Bengals fans will want this game a lot, obviously, and not make it super easy on this offense, which is something that can easily be overstated, but also can be understated if you don't think about that angle at all. These are real people. They're not just, stats on a spreadsheet. I would say that the most realistic angle for me is probably Donovan Peoples-Jones, just because regardless of any situation, I think that he is one of the better. He's got one of the better archetypes for a value receiver to have a path to a ceiling. So I'm going to say DPG number 1 for me here. I feel like not having any Nick Chubb in game stacks is wrong, but I don't think that Chubb is someone I'm prioritizing, even at the salary decrease in a single entry lineup.
I think
Or like
I'm open to
like
Chubb and game
outside,
stacks. What's that?
like outside of game stacks, I'm not going to play Chubb. So I very likely might stack this game in a single entry. So therefore, I just wanted to clarify that Chubb's in play for single entry, not necessarily for outside game stacks.
Standalone play, would you rank him below both McCaffrey and Barkley?
I would.
I would too. But I'm, like you said, probably going to game stack this one, so that might inherently inflate it. But like as a standalone play, I prefer to go with one of those guys. As for me, I think I like Njoku a bit more if he gets into full practice by Friday, because we've seen DPJ's workload really fluctuate based on whether Njoku is good to go. And Njoku, I think it was a Shefty tweet on Wednesday saying that Njoku would practice this week. If it was Shefty, I tend to put more weight in that. And he did practice Wednesday in a limited fashion. That to me implies that there are very good odds he plays this week, which implies that he is decently healthy. What?
As someone who's needed David Njoku in season long
fair.
all season, I've been through this before, and I don't have high expectations.
Yeah. I like the appeal, though, if we have like two obvious value tight ends in Greg Dulcich and Chikakonkwo, to pivot a little bit and go a little bit more to Njoku, a guy who's proven he has yardage upside, has proven role if he's healthy. That's the major caveat. Because he does impact DPJ. Now, DPJ is still viable for game stacks at 61, but he would be downgraded as a standalone play if Njoku winds up going. And I would say, like, of the lineups I've built this week, the ones that make me cringe the least, which may be a good or bad thing, are the Joe Burrow lineups. Like
Make
Joe
you smile
Burrow
the most.
Yeah.
Joe
Burrow, T. Higgins, David Njoku lineups are hot. Like those are the smile lineups. That's 3.5 smiles out of 5. Are Burrow, Higgins, and Njoku stacks, because I can get to Pollard, no sweat. I can get to Devontae Smith as a standalone play, no sweat, or a game stack with Saquon Barkley pretty easily. I can get my one running back in the 8,000, 7,000, 6,000 range in that lineup. So I think that right now, my main lineup, or if I've got one, it's probably going to be a Burrow Higgins stack as of now.
Close to that as well.
Okay. So you said you like Mixon a lot. I don't disagree in general. I'm just a little bit worried about the way that distribution could break down with him and Samaje Perine. Now there's Jamar Chase back too, that could impact pass catching, although Samaje Perine's pass catching role last week was phenomenal with Chase being back. So talk me into why I should be higher on Joe Mixon than I am.
I mean, we like Joe Mixon generally, right? Like throughout the season, before the concussion, before Samaje Perine. Right or no?
Yeah. Yes.
So
now that they are actually good as a rushing team, yes.
So Mixon practiced in full Wednesday. Zach Taylor said that looks like basically Samaji's been good, but Joe Mixon is our running back, specifically citing the last time that he played, he had 5 touchdowns. That is the touchdown thing is like, okay, you're not looking necessarily at just efficiency or like trying to, like, you think that Joe Mixon is good enough to score 5 times. That's what you're fixating on. He's going to come back to a big role in a game that we like. So I'm okay overextending a little bit with the salary. And I would think that they're going to want to get him touchdowns if they can. Plus, it's a really good ground matchup. So
it is.
I think that the salary is a bit too high for the potential for that rule to be a little bit worse. But I think that injected into this game, it's very fair in the end.
So one lineup, you have Mixon over McCaffrey?
Yes, but I'm probably, I don't know if I'm going to play either of them in my primary lineup.
And would you rather go Mixon at running back or have you can go Mixon with Burrow. I should make that clear.
Yeah.
But would you rather go Mixon at running back or a Burrow stack with like Higgins or Chase at quarterback?
I'd be more likely to go Burrow with T.
I think I would too. Yeah, I should probably find that Taylor quote so I can dig into it. But that does help to hear him say that. So I think that is influential.
I think I have the quote pasted.
Oh, okay, cool. If you have it in full, I take it.
Zach Taylor said, quote, Joe Mixon is our starting running back. He had 5 touchdowns the last time he played, end quote.
Okay. That works for me. That does up him for sure.
I mean,
especially if people are like me hesitant on Mixon coming off his, a 2-game layoff.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think I want to say TJ Hernandez did some research on from 444, found that people are too low on players coming off of an injury report. So
okay, cool.
I'm sure. I mean, if it wasn't TJ, I'm sure he's actually done something like that. But
probably it sounds like a TJ thing. TJ's very good at what he does, so I would not be surprised at all. Okay, Eagles are favored by 6.5 against the Giants. Total for that game is 45.5, which puts the Giants implied total or the Eagles implied total at 26. We're going to be on the Eagles here. They're very similar to the Bengals, where it's kind of assumed we'll be there. But any bringbacks for you on the Giants side with their implied total at 19.5?
So I'm going to say it sounds like you're higher on Saquon than I am.
Because I like this game.
That's fair. I wouldn't get the Saquon. I don't think I'm going to play anybody else from the Giants here. Like, you can talk to me about a specific tight end here, but
I don't know if I want to anymore after I did my research.
Okay. I think Saquon is game stacks only. I don't really care that I can't bring it back so much because the Eagles are probably the easiest team to stack in football right now.
Yeah.
Especially with Devontae Smith under salaried. So like if you want Jalen Hurts, you play him with AJ Brown and or Devontae Smith. I'm not saying same lineups, although last week would have been great. It's just, this is like as good as stacking gets. These guys have like 25+% target shares, downfield work, red zone work. They're very good. They have a good quarterback throwing them the ball. So usually I'm lower on an offense if I don't want to bring it back, but here it's not the case. I love Hurts and Brown and specifically Devontae Smith.
Yes, I agree with everything you said on the Eagles. No feedback there. I think that's 10 out of 10. As far as Saquon goes, the reason I like him is now the matchup is not as good as it was previously because Jordan Davis, I believe, was full in practice on Wednesday, which means he didn't play a lot of snaps last week. I'd expect that to increase this week. They have Ndamukong Suh. They've got some really good like buck kickers at D tackle once again, which they did not have previously. So the matchup is not why I want to go to Saquon. The reason I want to go to Saquon is I don't think people will, because the productivity has not been there. We haven't seen him go nuts all that much recently, but we know that that's kind of a thing with Saquon. He is a volatile back who he wants to hit dingers. He's not trying to hit singles. The slugging percentage for him is very high, which means he can be in ruts. He can have these down ticks for sure. But I also still think that the psychopath game is within his range of outcomes where he goes absolutely bananas. He has had a lot of passing involvement recently. He's had 5, 6, and 5 targets the past 3 games. Not a lot of production on that, but like getting work in the passing game, he can explode as a rusher. And I think that's still in there. So if his salary has come down, like $1,300 from what it was, maybe he won't be as popular as he, as maybe he should be. He is an explosive runner who is volatile in a good way. I think that all adds up to make him a pretty fun tournament play. So I almost want to actively try to get to him in like my primary single entry lineup this week because the factors are listed there.
I don't hate it. Philly, you can run on Philly. That's not really what usually good, like smart teams have bad rush defense. It just kind of seems to happen very often, but I see the case for it. I think that So my default like assumption lineup is that I'm going to play Burrow with T, and then find a way to bring it back. But honestly, if you go like Hurts, Devontae, and Saquon, that's a way of differentiating without being silly.
Yeah.
And I don't think you'd really regret that. So
Yeah,
it's a good
you can
call.
make you could also do a lineup where you don't run it back with any Browns. I guess you could go Njoku. All right. So if I've got Burrow, Higgins, and Njoku with a Devontae and Saquon mini stack, I've got 64-33 left for 3 slots with the Steelers defense in there. I could put DJ Chark in there. I can put James Cook in there. Oh gosh, this is fun. Whew. Okay. I might actually use this lineup. That's a fun lineup. Okay. I'm going to use that one. Okay. I feel really good about that. So I can get exposure to both these games very easily. I can use, like, if, who's your quote unquote one guy this week? It's like a toss up between T. Higgins and Devontae Smith, and I can get both those guys in that lineup with Tony Pollard. I think this is kind of fun. This might be my lineup. I might have just built it.
I mean, I know that I'm a huge donkey, but this probably sounds like a donkey thing. Did you know that you can long click on a player on FanDuel and drag them throughout your lineup?
No. What? Oh my gosh. That's so cool.
I never knew that.
How many times have I built lineups and had to take a guy out to put him in the flex because he wound up being the latest start time guy? Wow, that's life changing.
Wow.
This is. Okay. Can you do this on mobile? I don't build lineups on mobile because I respect myself. But can you do that on mobile too? I've done single game lineups on mobile. I guess I should clarify that.
Oh okay. Yeah, I just if I'm building I
have a lineup reserved for Thursday night. Let me just do this really quick. Let's put Josh Jacobs at the MVP. Oh no, I want to put Devontae at MVP. Can I drag Josh Jacobs? No, I can't. Okay, but you can't do it on desktop. So be a true elite DFS player. Build on desktop, but it's good to know you can do that. You blew my brains. Okay. But I think that for me, after
it just wrinkled my brain.
Yeah. After talking through these 3 games, I feel like if I'm building one lineup, the one game I am most likely to omit from a game stack and not game stack is probably Vikings Lions, which kind of goes back to what you said about it being a 0 quarterback lineup and thus shoving it down. I might wind up acting in that way.
I don't think you could. I mean, you can regret it, but
sure.
From a process standpoint, pivoting to Jalen Hurts or Joe Burrow, I think you can feel really good about that before kickoff. Whatever happens from there, but process-wise, I think it makes sense.
Okay, so let's dig into our trends for week number 14 and start things off by talking about the Dallas Cowboys. They're facing the Texans as 16.5-point favorites. My numbers say they should be favored by either 17.8 or 19.1, depending on the model. They're favored. Texans bad, Cowboys good. You're going to discuss the Cowboys' tendencies while leading. What did you find when digging into that?
Yeah, I mean, very few games are perfect. Even that Vikings-Lions game might not be the place you go for a quarterback. I know that we're now lower on value quarterbacks than we have been in the past just because rushing upside is so impactful. But I think that a lot of people like to play the value quarterbacks. It's going to make the rest of their lineups good. But, long story short, no game's really perfect this week. You have questions with bringbacks or quarterbacks or whatever. So why not take a long look at the Cowboys, despite their status as a huge favorite? Because they've been very good. Dak, good. Dak back. Play Cowboys, right? That's just what it should be. But since Prescott's return, the Cowboys have run 97 plays while up 8 or more points on those.
That's a lot of plays, man, in a small sample.
On those plays, they have an adjusted pace of 27 and a half seconds, which would rank 7th as a standalone team on the full season. So, I mean, they're always playing fast, but they keep up the tempo pretty well in this split. Their raw pass rate on those just 40%, but their pass rate over expectation pretty reasonable, minus 1.5%. But they're just really good. When they play from ahead, they need win. They need to keep winning, and they're not going to coming off a game where they just pulled their starters. I get it, but like they're not going to do that in the second quarter. That's not how football works. It just doesn't. They're not going to be up. Well, they might be up 42 at halftime, but realistically, probably not. But their EPA per play on pass and run plays in this sample is a 0.32. The NFL average when playing from ahead like this is just 0.02. Teams usually like just run the ball and don't care when they're like trailing or are leading substantially. Their passing EPA per play is a 0.67, which is sick. They can pour it on. They're still quick. They can be good. Houston, we know, not a good defense. 27th against the pass, according to numberFire's metrics. So, like, they should score points, right? And what does that cost us in terms of this game just being a blowout? I think the primary plays here are still the running backs. We had a lot of interest in Ezekiel Elliott on Monday's recap show before we learned that his salary was $8,000. We had a lot of interest in Tony Pollard whenever we realized that his salary was $7,500. In the past 2 games with Elliott's snaps back up since his return, he has a 53% snap rate, 39% route rate, which actually beats Pollard's 50% and 33% respectively. But similar overall workloads. If you look at the adjusted opportunities, which for us is carries plus double your targets, Elliott 20.5, Pollard 20. Red zone share is a lot better for Zeke than Pollard. Both get a lot of opportunity per snap, so that their snap rates they're not great, but they also get the ball when they're out there because they're just featured in this offense. So both are viable. Pollard definitely better at the salary given the yardage upside. I don't think I'll get to Zeke. He's been scoring a lot. He just doesn't have the yardage upside really to burn us. So I think he's oversalaried at 8,000, and I'm going to stay there. Now, I've looked at teams who were big favorites in the past. You can still see yardage upside from, top receivers. And I think that CeeDee Lamb is someone who honestly will be more rostered than I would think.
That's what I've seen based on early roster rate projections too.
And so we might not be able to get sneaky by playing CeeDee Lamb. But he's got a 29% target share since week 10 with Noah Brown back in the lineup. 5 downfield targets per game, which for me is 10 plus yards downfield. Michael Gallup's at a 20% target share though. 2.8 downfield targets per game. Dalton Schultz 17%, Tony Pollard 13%. So it's a spot where historically this leads to really high floors for quarterbacks, maybe not elite ceilings. So I'm probably not going to get there with Dak. I thought initially that Zeke would be a good play in the low 7,000 range, but we didn't get that. I thought initially that CeeDee Lamb would be a weird pivot if you could talk yourself into it. I don't know if that's going to happen. So is it just Pollard for you despite this huge implied team total? What are your thoughts on maybe some value pieces like Michael Gallup, Dalton Schultz?
Yeah, I thought Schultz, it's kind of the same discussion as Zeke, where I'm like, okay, if Schultz is in the 5,000 range, he's got yardage upside. It's a super high implied total, which is always good for tight ends, but he came in at 62, which is high.
Yeah.
Gallup at 6,000, that's pretty okay. So I would say Pollard is a focal point for me, a guy I want to be very heavy on. Gallup is I guess I'm differentiating off of DJ Chark at 6,000, trying to, lower so I don't have 54% DJ Chark again. I might, but maybe so I don't get to 90 again. I didn't actually get there, but it was a joke. I think it's really just Pollard as a priority, but I feel really good about him. And Gallup filtered through. I probably won't get to Schultz because of the salary. Probably won't get to Lamb. And that could be stupid. But I think the reason I feel better about doing that is because the Cowboys have shown both last year and other times, if they can kick your butt on the ground, they're going to do it. And they can do that here. So I think that if FanDuel Sportsbook were to offer a rushing yardage prop for the team, how high would be too high for that? They went for 220 last week.
That's the kind of thing that I don't know. And if someone were to ask me what does a team usually rush for in a game? As a team, I don't know.
They've gone for 140 in 6 straight games.
I don't know. That's not a stat I look at. So I don't know, but
I think they just kick butt in the ground.
I think that's very possible too. Is that enough though for you to get to Zeke?
No.
I don't think so either.
Because his salary is high enough where it's if he gets you 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, That's still 22 points at 8,000.
And that's
like, does he have more than
cap.
100 yards in his range of outcomes? Maybe, but it's not super likely.
Yeah.
Whereas Pollard went for 189 in Zeke's first game back. So I think that Zeke has a high floor, which is, it is what it is. I don't care about that. You may, and that's fine. But, and like, he's a good player. I just wish he were lower salaried. So Pollard for me. Okay. Let's talk about the Bills facing off with the Jets. It's a repeat divisional matchup. The first one was in week 9, so not that long ago. Tough spot for the Bills. So I want to dig in and see what the Bills have done against tough defenses so far this year, is because the Jets do lead my defensive power rankings this year. But across the entire season, the Bills have just 2 matchups against top 10 defenses by numberFire schedule adjusted metrics. The other one was the Patriots in week 13, that Thursday night game. So that's a small sample. I think that in itself is kind of noteworthy. But in those 2 games, the Bills have scored 17 and 24 points. The first meeting was with the Jets. Allen sustained his elbow injury, but that happened late at the end of the game. He finished that game with negative 0.27, passing net expected points per dropback. It was their second worst offensive showing this year, even after adjusting for the matchup, ahead of just week 1 against the Rams. Allen still scored 26 FanDuel points, but it was thanks to 86 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, which is a lot. Against the Patriots, the Bills went pretty run heavy there. 18 passes to 17 rushes on early downs in the first half, and they were pretty effective in doing so, honestly. James Cook finished with 14 carries and 6 targets for 105 yards. He did lose 2-minute work, and he played just one of the 8 non-kneel down snaps in the fourth quarter, but they seemed to really like what he was doing. He even played 12 snaps with Hines in the field at the same time, which is very odd, but very cool. The Jets rush defense isn't as stifling as their pass defense, and it's just a hair worse than the Patriots rush defense. So I think that Cook is pretty lively at $6,100. A rush-heavy approach to the Bills would in theory hurt the pass catchers, but in 4 games since Allen's injury, Stephon Diggs, 11.3 targets per game. Gabe Davis is at 7. Isaiah McKenzie, 5.25. So they're still getting volume. Against the Jets, Diggs had 10 targets for 93 yards. Davis had 5 for 33. McKenzie not really involved. Diggs' salary of $8,500 is reasonable. I just don't know if I'll get to him when the alternatives are Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and A.J. Brown, all of whom are in games that are better for stacking. Davis 62 is interesting. He did line up against Sauce Gardner on half of his snaps in the first meeting. DJ Reed playing pretty well too. I think he missed practice due to illness on Wednesday, so he should be fine. I'm going to have exposure to Gabe, but I do want to keep it suppressed in a way. As for Josh Allen, he could be an elite tournament pivot if he gets glossed over, but that's due to his rushing primarily. The key pitch is as a pivot for Allen, and he's not a priority for me as a result. I think there's a guy I'd rather pivot to. We'll talk about later on. But as a result, I think that Cook is kind of the one guy I see myself actively seeking out here. Where are you on Cook, and where are you on the rest of this Bills offense?
I think Cook is he's very, I think you said lively. I think he's lively this week due to the salary and the salary primarily. This is one of those spots that if we had tons of running backs or we had enough value elsewhere, I would say I'll just wait and see. I don't love the matchup. I don't know if what his workload was in week 13 is what it's going to be the rest of the season. I don't know if that was like the harbinger or is it harbinger? Harbinger?
I've read it. I've never said it.
I've heard, what is it? I've heard it both ways.
Yes.
So that could be like the lead in to an expanded role outside the mini buy for a rookie. Like I could see it from that angle. So I'm not like out on him saying like, well, that's absolutely, he's going to, be in like a sort of 50-50 timeshare with Singletary. I think there's potential for more. So I'm most interested in Cook. I think everyone else is more of a tournament pivot, like you said, even the pass catchers, even Davis at the salary. The catch rate over expectation has been a little bit down lately. So
I think he's still playing hurt.
Like you could spin that as like he's still hurt or regression's about to hit. But I think it's just, I might play Cook in a single entry or head to head out of not just necessity, but I really need value. But everyone else, I think, is just sort of trying to get cute.
Yeah, I think that if we assume that James Cook's role remained the same in week 13, which I think is the floor, I think that the floor is that his role remains the same. He'd be like a 20% exposure guy for me because like he can get by in that role. But then you bake in the potential for that role to get better. Because like he had a 56% snap rate in the first quarter and a 65% snap rate in the third quarter. So like
the question is just, I think we'd all agree that like 20% is fine, but is it main lineup, like single entry priority? Does he get there?
yes, because it allows me to get other guys I like a
that's-
lot, and he has a ceiling.
That's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah, because if he increases the odds, I can get you Devontae Smith, T. Higgins, et cetera, without reducing the ceiling of my lineup. I want that, and that's kind of what I think we get here.
Would you stack James and Dalvin Cook?
Whoa, yeah, heck yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I might rebuild this lineup just to get there.
I'm just having fun dragging players around the lineup now.
Okay, I'm gonna have to ask you to take a break from that to tell me about the Jags because they're facing the Titans. I think so. My numbers like this game a lot in terms of its potential for offense relative to what the total is. And if it's a stupid slate, a weird slate, where there's a lot of paths to destruction in good games, we want to find games that may fly a bit under the radar and could blow up. I think this game is probably my favorite from that perspective. So talk to me about the Jags and what you see against them facing the Titans.
So obviously this is under the assumption that Trevor Lawrence plays. Sounds like he's going to play. May not be 100%. That hurts him a little bit because he does run. He's had 32, 1, 26, 53 yards over his past four. So like there's some juice with him from a rushing standpoint, but he's had no more than 6 carries in a game all season. So it's not like it's his sole source of getting there. But again, assuming that we get Lawrence, I think this is an interesting spot. This is a divisional matchup. And despite the fact that it's already week 14, this is the first matchup between the two, which I'll take. Pretty rare to get that this late into the season. Against similarly ranked adjusted pass defenses, so teams between 12th and 20th. Trevor Lawrence has averaged 250 yards, 2.2 passing touchdowns for over 22 FanDuel points per game, while rushing 3.6 times for 13.6 yards. I don't know, but again, like the production's still there, rushing a little bit, but not. We're not talking like 60, 80 yards per game, which is how he's getting there because you'd expect that he doesn't run as much this week after that really scary looking injury from last week. But in those matchups, the efficiency is really good. On a per dropback basis, he's at 0.28, passing net expected points over the defense's expectation, like the defensive average, with almost a 57% passing success rate. He's just like not been good against great defenses, and like that's fine. There are just quarterbacks, especially a lot of younger guys, but some older guys too, who are like matchup dependent. There are a few who it doesn't matter what the matchup is, and that's why they're salaried in the upper 8,000s always. But his salary is only 7,200. I'm not saying I'm going to get there on a worse quarterback slate. I think I would very much consider it. But I guess there's 3 games with at least 24 FanDuel points, but none above 26. So it's more about this offense's ceiling rather than like, can they get me something? I think they can get me something. Are they going to make me regret not using them? Like any of these guys, that's the bigger question. In 10 games with all the main pass catchers healthy, Christian Kirk has a 24% target share at 8.5 per game, 25% weighted target share, which just accounts for red zone and downfield work for me. Zay Jones is actually pretty close at 22.6% overall, 22.4% weighted. I know we generally like Zay. I think that's interesting this week. Marvin Jones, 16%, but 18% weighted. Evan Ingram, not our. I mean, I know that the joke is I like Evan Ingram a lot more than you, but 14.5% target share. It's interesting. I think that like Kirk and Zay are very much in play. The guy I have the most interest in though is Travis Etienne. Stepped back into an 87% snap rate last week, had both of the red zone carries. The production was down, but now the salary's down. And if you just take a step back and look at his salary relative to everyone else, we're getting a guy who probably is going to play like 85% of the snaps, tied to a team who should do something. against a completely elite defense. I think the ETN, if you look at it from that perspective, is one of the best running back plays. I'm not saying the best, but top 2, maybe alongside like Pollard at salary, all things considered. But again, as far as the ceilings go, Christian Kirk has 2 games with 20 plus, as does ETN. Zay has a game with 19.5 and 22. So like those 3 guys have somewhat of a ceiling, despite the fact that Lawrence himself is probably not going to get to 30. What are your thoughts on the Jaguars here? Probably not a full game stack by any means, although we can bring it back with Chigakonkwo. What are your thoughts on Jacksonville this week?
Yeah, ETN not on the injury report at all on Wednesday, so that's good, which means the foot injury no longer even like a lingering concern with him. I think that that's intriguing. I think that they'll have a tough time running on the Jags, but maybe that encourages them to get the ball to him more in the passing game. And his salary is very low at 74. He has like the same burst as Pollard, same salary, likely lower roster rate. So I think that there are a lot of paths to liking ETN. Highest on him. Zay, I question his upside, but then you were listing out like his ceiling games. He said he had 22 in a game. That game had no touchdowns. He had 145 receiving yards in that game. Like that's juice. He's not like a good real world receiver, but he's getting a lot of work against a secondary that doesn't have a lot of talent in it. So like, I think Kirk carries a lot of opportunity cost because he's right around like he's around Devontae Smith. I think both those guys have better ceilings than him in better games, but Zay doesn't carry that same cost because the guys around him, like George Pickens, what are we doing? Why is he 63? I love Gabe, but like, yeah, some question marks there. Darius Slayton's fun. He gets yardage, but like, so I think Zay is okay. I would say ETN, guy I want to get to. Zay, I'm okay getting to. That's probably the primary look for me in this one.
Same here. Zay had a 2-point conversion in that game, which is not a touchdown, but it's something.
Good call out. Yep.
And yeah, I think ETN by default is going to be someone that I have a lot of exposure to. I think the salary for the snap rate and for the offense being as good as it is, which is, I'm saying it specifically, it's as good as it is. It's not. But I think that I would be open to Zay, especially because I'm going to have a lot of Okonkwo and, just kind of tying those 2 together in case there's a lot of yardage in this game. I think those guys have potential for a good portion of that.
Yeah, Jags are 13th in my offensive power rankings after last week, where they came up short against a very not elite defense. So that's pretty encouraging, I think, for this week. Okay, my second trend is the Chiefs against tough defenses, because similar to the Bills, the Chiefs are in a pretty rough spot this week against Denver. It is the first time they faced. So similar to the Jags Titans, first time in the division. That's a positive thing. Broncos rank second in my defensive power rankings behind just the Jets. This will be the 4th time the Chiefs have faced a top 10 defense by numberFire's rankings, first time against Denver. In the previous 3 games, the Chiefs have scored 41, 20, and 44 points. So upside still very much there. Mahomes himself had 24.4 FanDuel points, 21.6, and 27.9. All good, nothing groundbreaking, but in that San Francisco game, he could have gone nuts. 423 passing yards and no rushing yards. But they ran for 3 touchdowns, 2 by Mecole Hardman. So I think Mahomes has an upside game well within his range of outcomes, despite the tough matchup here. If he is tracking to be low rostered, which I've seen about 5% right now, I would rather pivot to him than Josh Allen. The same thought process would apply to Travis Kelce. It is tough to get there for sure, but I'd have to trust at least one low salary back and DJ Chark and maybe more at wide receiver, but it could be worth it. Juju Smith-Schuster returned to his typical role against the Bengals, just didn't have the production. His salary's down to 66. I think this could be a good week to buy back in on Juju, again, assuming he's low rostered. As far as Isaiah Pacheco goes, he could get run here. 66% snap rate in the second half against the Rams, a game where they were up comfortably. 52% against the Jags in week 10. I do worry a bit about the fact that this is a Melvin Gordon potential revenge game, but Melvin's on the practice squad, which means we'll know Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern whether Melvin will be active, because they'd have to elevate him to the active roster to get him active here. So between the Chiefs and the Bills, I'm more interested in the Chiefs as a pivot among the powerful offenses in tough matchups. I can see Pacheco being a rotational piece in tournaments. I don't mind bringbacks with Dulcich or Judy, again, as mentioned before. So where are you on the Chiefs as a potential pivot this week?
I mean, the Chiefs are always the all-time pivot if they're not popular.
Yeah.
And I think that you can just, if you just play the Chiefs whenever they're not like the mega chalk, you're probably going to be like, you're going to look good long-term. We've seen this team do very well over the years against bad defenses or against good defenses and just like buck all the trends and be like, yeah, that makes sense.
Like Mahomes, I think last year against top 10 defenses at like 0.41 passing net expected points per drop back, which is like, it would lead the league.
Yeah.
If it were his full. That's like Tua this year, a little bit above Tua this year now after the 49ers game, like just disgusting stuff.
Travis Kelce coming off of a really down game.
I know. Thanks.
Yeah. Finally prioritized them. I mean, I've done it a few times this year, but
love to see it.
Like uncertainty around the pass catchers, a little bit of uncertainty around
salaries down a bit.
Yeah. Like the issue is there's no guarantee that they do put up points or that Denver can score it all and like keep this game interesting. I don't think that's going to matter to the Chiefs though. They'll pour it on. Along with that, though, you have the question marks of the non-Kelce pass catchers and the running backs. So, like, it's almost like, look, if you want a chance at the glory, you got to take a chance. Yeah. Unless you're just playing Kelce and Mahomes, which going to Kelce Mahomes stack after Kelce had a down game in a very, very tough matchup this week, like that's one of those that we can regret not doing by 4:35 on Sunday.
Yeah, I think I'm talking myself more into them as we go along.
Yeah.
But I'm okay with that. I'm okay with talking myself into the Chiefs. Like that's not going to make me too scared. So I think that if I'm like my highest dollar single entry lineup is probably going to be Burrow, but like second or third highest highest dollar single entry, that might be a Mahomes spot. And I'll definitely get there in multi-entry for sure.
Would you rather, knowing the rest of the constrictions that this would cause, to differentiate, let's say, play Mahomes and Kelce stack in a tough matchup, or go down to like Jared Goff to pair with Amon-Ra
Mahomes Kelce,
even though it's going to cause more restrictions? Do you think that's the better?
Like in which situation are you more likely to kick your own butt? Saying, I used Patrick Mahomes, or saying, I used Jared Goff?
Right, like I'm saying,
I feel like I'd beat myself up in an alley if I'm like, I'm going to load up on Jared Goff instead of Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, it's not like loading up. It's just like, okay, I can save a lot of salary by going Goff, St. Brown, or I can spend up to be contrarian. I think it's probably Mahomes, Kelce.
I agree. Okay, let's take a look at the weather for this week. We got 11-mile-per-hour winds in Jersey for the Giants and the Eagles with a chance of rain. Nothing too concerning there yet, but I would note that. There's a chance of rain in Buffalo for the Jets and the Bills. Winds at 9 miles per hour there. 11-mile-per-hour winds in Denver for the Broncos and Chiefs. As of now, I would not flag any of those as being concerning, but they are noteworthy. Check back on them on Sunday to make sure they have not gotten worse, but as of now, I think we're good to go. So let's dive in now to our positional plays for week number 14, starting off at quarterback. Brandon, who are you targeting on FanDuel in the main slate?
Jalen Hurts, 87. I don't know if we talked about him like enough specifically, but the Eagles are just a smart team. They've played proper football against what like opposing defenses allow you to do. When a team like forces them to keep the ball closer to the line of scrimmage, they do. But the Giants are 29th in ADOT allowed. Hurts, just we know what the upside is. Overall, he's averaging almost 10 carries a game, 52 yards per game. Two very obvious stack candidates, and they need to keep winning. So I'm not that worried about workload getting scaled back if they're ahead. Second Love, most realistically, my main quarterback for the week, because the 400 goes a good amount of the way this week. But Joe Burrow, big ceiling. Also two, potentially three stat candidates, depending on, I guess, if you count Mixon or Tyler Boyd, if you're open to Tyler Boyd. But He's had 9 and 11 carries over the past 2 games for 32 and 46 yards in them. That comes along with 270 passing yards, 270 and 286 passing yards. So hasn't really like had the game where everything clicks together. Even like last week was great, but potentially there's room for more against the Browns. I think it's very possible. Cleveland's not a big issue with pressure either, so I love Burrow. He's probably going to be my main quarterback this week.
If I give you a 3-entry max tournament, I think for me, I would go 1 Burrow, 1 Hurts, 1 Mahomes. How would you distribute those 3?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I would want to do that, but to maximize,
or are you more likely to go like a Burrow Chase, Burrow Higgins, and then 1 Hurts?
I think if it's like 3-entry, it's just going to be all 1 quarterback.
Okay, sure.
And I think it's going to be Burrow based on it's Burrow or Hurts.
Yeah, I think that they are the top 2 plays. And then Mahomes is the pivot. So let's talk about Mahomes here, as he is my first love as a pivot. Again, I prefer Hurts and Burrow over Mahomes. And if I had 3, like a 3-entry max, I would go with 1 of each personally, because I'm more okay being a bit more spread out there. Because I'll have 90% DJ Chark. So like, who cares?
So yeah. So like if you go very similar lineups, but then just kind of tweak
Correct.
that.
Like I will probably have the same 3 or 2 running backs.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right.
That's the way I tend to go, is more so that way. With Mahomes though, Kansas City actually leads my model's projected offensive efficiency for the entire week, not just the main slate. They actually have the highest projected offensive efficiency this week, despite loving the Broncos. The Chiefs are just disgusting. They're absurd. They're nuts. Mahomes has blown up in tough spots. He shouldn't be super popular. First time facing Denver this week, so give me Mahomes as a pivot. Second love is Joe Burrow, likely my primary quarterback, similar to you this week. He's been running a bit more recently. He had 11 rush attempts. 3 of those were kneels, I believe, last week. So eight rush attempts, 8 legit rush attempts last week for like almost 50 yards and a touchdown. He has all of his weapons. Facing off with the Browns, they want to win the AFC North, and it's actually obtainable now with Baltimore having Lamar banged up. So Joey Cool back in once again, but I think that I would go 1 of each. And I don't want that to make it seem like I'm lower on Hurts, because I am higher on him than Mahomes. He has 2 paths to lighting up a slate, which is sick. So maybe I should have Hurts over Burrow, but I don't know. It's one of those 2 guys as like the top play for this week.
Yeah, the more I'm sitting here, I'm like, I should probably just play Jalen Hurts primarily, find a way to get there. And a way to get there is Devontae Smith being undersalaried.
Correct.
That helps.
And a Saquon bringback or a Daniel Bellinger. Anyway, let's go to running back. What you got there?
I have Joe Mixon, 85. I have Joe Mixon or Samaje Perine, but I can't really see how Mixon goes from a full practice Wednesday to not playing. But, I've been saying that I might be worried about Mixon's workload because Samaje Perine has been good. So like once Mixon comes back, do they scale him back? But the tweet that I was quoting before came from Paul Diener Jr., who works for The Athletic, covering the Bengals. The quote is, Zach Taylor says many great things about what Samaje Perine has done. Also says, quote, Joe Mixon is our starting running back. He had 5 touchdowns the last time he played. So I feel like that's a very ringing endorsement for Mixon to get a lot of work. Also probably feels good to get Joe Mixon some touchdowns. From inside the 5, I think that there will be enough of those. Cleveland is 28th in adjusted rush defense, according to numberFire's metrics, 28th also in rushing yards over expectation allowed per carry. I think the team makes a lot of sense in a game that we like. My second love, Tony Pollard at 75. I think the salary is just too low for what the ceiling is. He has a per carry average of 1.82 rushing yards over expectation, which is just sick. Houston, 4th worst by rushing yards over expectation per carry allowed. Basically last in rushing net expected points per carry and success rate allowed as well. Even with Zeke back, the yardage upside's there. So I like Pollard. And then my third love, because you're going to talk about James Cook, is going to be Travis Etienne. I didn't want to spoil that, but I wanted to make sure that he was.
You
one
can
of our
spoil it. Other people care.
Travis Etienne, again, like 87% of the snaps coming back last week, the week before, could have returned but didn't. Had a 61% route rate. You don't really get like this great of a workload or snap rate from someone at 7,400, let alone someone as good as Etienne. So I think Etienne is the most likely running back that I'm going to play this week.
Over Pollard?
Very close.
Okay. I think that's fair, but I was surprised, but I think that's fair. My first love is Christian McCaffrey. I typically don't want to tie my running backs to backup quarterbacks because bad process, lower touchdown expectation, but the way McCaffrey was used last week was like vintage McCaffrey with 17 carries and 10 targets. In 2 games he's played with no Eli Mitchell, he has a 74% red zone share. Like not of running backs, of all opportunities on the team. He had 6 of 9 and 7 out of 10, I believe, in those 2 games. He's had 17.5 carries and 9.5 targets per game, 140 total yards in both those games. The passing game usage will help him overcome a tough matchup. So I do like Saquon, and Saquon might be in my like primary lineup as a bring back for Hurts, but McCaffrey, I think, is a standalone play, is my favorite guy in this range. My second love is Tony Pollard. In 3 games with Zeke being back, Pollard's at 15 carries, 3.7 targets, and 118.7 yards from scrimmage per game with a huge upside game in there, which does skew the sample, but also it's nice to know we can do that still. The Cowboys are willing to kick butt on the ground when they can, and they will be able to here. So the snaps won't be there, but the production has still very, very much been there. So Tony Pollard, to me, a great play this week. My third love is James Cook. It is risky because, we don't tend to go at Bills backs very often, stuff like that, but I think it's worth it. Even if he keeps the same role he had last week, he had 14 carries and 6 targets with 105 yards from scrimmage. That could expand. It's a big game for the Bills because the Dolphins are now 3.5-point favorites on Sunday night. The Bills need to keep their foot on the gas to both win the AFC East and potentially get the 1 seed in the AFC. So I think we could see James Cook's role expand. And if it does, it's to the moon, baby. What do you got at wide receiver?
I start a little bit lower with Devontae Smith at 7,000 even. Just it feels like you're in the layup line with Devontae Smith here, just at 7,000. Again, similar to Pollard, salary is too low for what the ceiling is. Single game target shares over his past 4, 32%, 39%, 36%, 21%. The Giants allow an ADOT of 11.2 yards to receivers, which is above the league average. Not substantially, but it helps. And again, they're 29th overall in ADOT allowed. I'm going to bump down below 6,000 for my second 2 loves because I am warming up to the idea of like a core of Mixon, Pollard,
sure,
and ETN. And I think it's doable if you're open to some value receivers. I don't think I'm as into receiver in the flex as I was on Monday, but Tyler Boyd should benefit with Hayden Hurst banged up. Last week, 94% route rate, 5 targets with almost a 12-yard ADOT, 4 of those downfield for him and a drop touchdown, but 2 red zone targets last week. So I think that Boyd very much in play at that salary. And my third love is your boy DJ Chark, 5,700, 15% target share the past 2 games, which usually is not enough, but he has a good matchup against the Vikings, who were 32nd in catch rate over expectation allowed to receivers. They allow 1.83 yards per route run to receivers. It's the 4th highest rate. It's the game of the week, and I just want to have some exposure to Chark again this week.
Chark week. It's back. My first love is T. Higgins. He has a 23% target share in games played with Jamar Chase, which is not elite, but also when you're T. Higgins, you don't need a lot to go nuts. He has a monster ceiling, $7,800 of salary there. I don't expect him to get a lot of attention this week because he had the touchdown last week, but a dud from a yardage perspective. He got a salary reduction too, playing in one of the better games this week. I think T is like nuts as far as like how much I like him this week. My second love is Devontae Smith because in 3 games with no Dallas Goedert, he has a 31% overall target share, 38% deep, and 38% inside the red zone. He has an 8+ targets in 4 straight games. He's had efficiency on those targets too. There's been a lot of talk about A.J. Brown getting John Robinson fired this week, so a lot of A.J. Brown discussion on Twitter. That may help Smith come in at a lower roster rate than where he should be. Not low roster, but lower than he should be. So love Devontae. I think Higgins and Devontae are my 2 favorite plays, regardless of position for this week. My third love, I'll go with DJ Chark too. So 2 overlapping here with Smith and Chark, but the Vikings do let up a higher ADOT than the league average because they've got pretty bad cornerback play. 46% of the deep targets in games that Reynolds and Chark have played have gone to Chark. I think Jameson Williams should play more this week, but he's probably more likely to get into Khalif Raymond and Reynolds than Chark. They had a picture on the Lions social media account this week, and it was Name That Album. And the 3 receivers in it were Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, and DJ Chark. Probably implies he's going to keep playing as Williams gets ramped up.
Yes, I do look to social media memes and graphics to learn vital info of
Do you
playing
not?
time.
Are you joking? You're a fish. If you don't look at social media, team socials, you're a fish. That's all you got to say. I'm right.
Well, I don't know what the Broncos social's doing, but if they're not just like plastering Greg Dulcich all over, they're doing something wrong.
Tell me about Greg Dulcich as we move to tight end.
8 targets last week with Cortland Sutton leaving early. Jerry Jeudy was limited in that game, just 8 routes, but 4 targets, which is so sick. But Dulcich could kind of be like the de facto wide receiver 1, depending on how healthy Jeudy is. 85 yards for him last week in that game. No touchdowns in his first game. I do recall a touchdown that he scored but got called back. So, like, he's going to score eventually, and he's got yardage upside. In this game, they should have to throw, and maybe they'll finally get over 23 points if they're trailing by 23 in the first quarter. Maybe they'll get there. And my second love, Chig Okonkwo, $4,800 salary. I don't know how often I get to Kelsey. I do like the idea of differentiating there, but it changes a lot about the rest of the lineup. So I'm going to be in the lower salary range pretty often. Okonkwo, 20% target share last week with Treylon Burks leaving early. It was only 5 targets, but on the year, he is averaging, according to Next Gen Stats, 3.06 yards per route run. That leads all tight ends. Only 6 have at least 2.0 in that metric. It's only 75 routes for him, but
he's Tyreek Hill except bigger. He's basically it's what we're saying.
Like he's got yard, like he can run, or he can like have a 60-yard catch and run and pay off and be fine.
I think he's had like I think it was Bill Barnwell tweeted this week that like Okonkwo is like near the top of the league in 40-yard receptions this year, which is disgusting.
Yeah.
And like you said, he's in my loves too. 59% route rate last week overall, 69% from the second quarter on. Right. He was in the slaughter out wide on 14 of 19 routes, which is not always great. We saw it with Kyle Pitts, but like it means that they view him as a receiver and get him out in like good routes, which is fun. They need explosive guys if Burks sits. So I like Okonkwo too. My first love was David Njoku. The fact that it was reported on Monday, I believe that he was going to practice this week, upped my confidence in him. The Browns still have a shot at the playoffs, not a super big shot, but Njoku has yardage upside, $5,600, logical bring back for my Joe Burrow team. So I do want to get to Njoku. I will say I've tried to talk myself out of Daniel Bellinger at 48 as a pivot off of Okonkwo. I haven't been able to successfully yet. I've lowered my enthusiasm about it, but like he played almost every snap last week. I'm going to have stacks of that Eagles Giants game. So I will have lineups where I use Bellinger as a way to lower my exposure to Okonkwo a bit and have a game stack in that game. But what? Are you looking at his profile? It's bad.
His 8 out last week on 5 targets,
Negative?
0.7.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, like, that's why I'm not higher on this, but every snap,
like you could do worse. You could do worse.
Yeah, you could definitely do worse. It's not Okonkwo is the better play.
You could do worse, especially because assuming Andrews doesn't erupt, you're betting just against Kelsey to torch us against a really good defense.
Yeah.
Which can happen, but it's not you don't need to overcome too many potential big games this week.
Extremely dumb question that you can reject very quickly if you want to. Would you consider Kelsey and Dulcich in the same lineup with Dulcich as the flex?
Probably not.
Yeah. I agree, but I had to ask at least.
I don't ever want to play 2 tight ends.
I agree.
I didn't want to play one. So
correct. I agree. Okay. Defense. What you got there?
I have the Steelers. I think they're just the easiest play, 3,800. Tyler Huntley doesn't really have a lot of pass catchers to throw to that are like 100% healthy. This team, they played last year in week 18, and both teams had like a really weird chance to make the playoffs, but he didn't do very well. That's not like all that it's based on, but that's relevant because the sample on Huntley is pretty small. And that means that they also have like enough film on him specifically. So I think the Steelers just are the best play of the week by far.
I agree. They're my love too. He's fun, Huntley is, but he's also mistake prone. He should not have gone undrafted. That should not have happened, but like he was undrafted. So like, undrafted guy who makes some mistakes. It's not a very well-designed offense. Not a very I don't know. They put a lot on Lamar's shoulders, and putting a lot on Huntley's shoulders is a tougher ask to mask the issues with their scheme. So I'm okay with the Steelers too. I will say the Lions at 31 are not totally out of play.
I thought about it.
That line did move back to 1.5. So there's been some money coming into the Vikings, obviously, but it's 31. Their defense has been a lot better the past 6 weeks or so, like a lot better. They've gone from like DFL, my defensive power rankings, to 27th. So getting there, they're getting better, which is sad that 27th is better, but I think they're in play. I think the Jags are also in play at 34 with their rush defense being pretty good, forcing the Titans to pass. Tannehill still has some sackiness in him. No Treylon Burks, that helps. So I think they're at least interesting as well. But Steelers primary play with considerations for the Jags and the Lions if I need to save some salary. Any final thoughts for you, Brandon, before we wrap up this week 14 slate?
I think we covered it. I think we covered ways to pivot, ways not to be silly. I feel good.
I'm looking forward to the Chiefs finally dropping a dud on Sunday. What could go wrong with pivoting them against a world-class kind of defense? That is all that we have here for today on the Heat Check. But as mentioned, we are back once again Monday to recap everything. I'll be in Florida, Marco Island, for the WFFC this weekend. So if you're at the WFFC, say hello. More than happy to chat down there. Enjoy some sun down there. Recording the recap podcast from Marco Island on Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube page and up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed after that. So go get that wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. Brandon, if people have questions for you on your favorite social media platform, Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm on Twitter at Gdula13, GDULA13.
And I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcasts. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your NFL DFS lineups for this week. We'll talk to you once again on Monday to wrap it all up. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.